In this Diablo 4 video, I'm going to be bringing you up to speed on all the major changes made since the launch of Diablo 4 last June, which will prepare you for everything you need to know before you jump into the new expansion, Vessel of Hatred. For instance, did you know all classes are getting 1 new skill, 1 new key passive, and 4 new passive skills? If you want to know more about those specifics, however, you can see our class videos about those things. But for this video, I will be specifically covering the big new systems that you might not be aware of if you've not played Diablo 4 in some time. There have been a lot of quality of life changes, from adding a pet that picks up dropped loot for you, to rearranging towns for easy access to all services and stashes, and an option to favorite a town so you always teleport there. There's even a party finder now so you can do group content easier. After we catch you up on all the Eternal Realm knowledge, we will also cover all the brand new features you can expect from the Vessel of Hatred expansion, such as the new Spiritborn class, the new region of Nahantu, Runewords, Mercenaries, and more. The first thing to discuss are the changes to leveling and level cap. Diablo 4 characters will now only level up to level 60, not level 100, making it much faster to make a max level character. This will allow Diablo 4 players to try other classes out more easily and will encourage people to participate in the seasonal content, since it won't take as long to reach max level. Additionally, you will gain skill points from levels 51 to 60, adding a total of 10 more skill points to all players, and these changes apply regardless of whether or not you own Vessel of Hatred. Note that players who own Vessel of Hatred will gain an additional 2 skill points from exploring the new region. Characters will now begin earning Paragon points once they reach level 60, but with 2 huge changes. Firstly, players can now earn a total of 300 Paragon points to use on each character, which is a significant increase. And secondly, but most importantly, Paragon points are now earned account-wide. This means if you earn Paragon points on your rogue, for example, your other characters will also gain those points. If your character was level 100 before the launch of Vessel of Hatred, it will be lowered, and Paragon points will be added depending on how many you had before in order to fit into this new system. Players will also now only be able to equip 5 Paragon boards in total, including your first board, so 4 boards in addition to your starter board. This means that each build will have a max of 5 glyphs equipped, where many builds had 7 or 8 glyphs before. You'll have to narrow down both the boards and glyphs you want to use. The good news, though, is that all classes have received 1 new Paragon board, and there have been many changes to existing Paragon boards as well, so be sure to check out what nodes they now have and make sure they are still bonuses that benefit your build. Once you reach level 60, glyphs will begin dropping for you and you can start leveling them up just like before, but there are some changes on how you do this. Instead of running nightmare dungeons to assign experience to glyphs, players will now run the Pit of Artificers found in Saragar and level up their glyphs upon successfully completing their attempt. The better their run, the more chances they have to level up their glyphs. Higher level pit runs yields more ranks when improving a glyph, and also increases the chances of successfully improving it. This system is similar to the endgame of Diablo 3, where the higher level your glyph, the higher level of pit you will need to run in order to continue to upgrade it effectively, as failure rate gets higher as your glyph levels. Glyphs can also be upgraded now to level 100, up from 21, so there's much more room to grow with them, and players will need to make many pit runs in order to max these glyphs out. Glyphs also have legendary effects now that are unlocked once you level them up to 45, providing even further benefit to you. The next thing to know is that Diablo 4's difficulty system has been changed and no longer features world tiers 1 to 4. Instead, players will now have to choose for normal or hard while playing the game, with expert and penitent difficulties unlocking as you progress the main campaign. For returning players who have already finished the campaign, these difficulties will already be unlocked for you. Note that you can now do nightmare dungeons on any difficulty of the game, even normal, and that these no longer go up to 100. These have been simplified to be in line with the difficulty you are playing on, so hard nightmare dungeons will be easier than if you're playing on expert. If you have a nightmare sigil in your inventory and want to use it on a different difficulty, simply change the difficulty at any world stone before using it. In another throwback to Diablo 3, torment difficulties will also be making a return in order to allow players to customize their difficulty more. These difficulties, unlike the others, however, need to be unlocked by completing certain tiers of the Pit of Artificers once you reach level 60. You'll be aiming to complete tier 20 first, as this unlocks Torment 1. Once you reach Torment 1, boss summoning materials and masterworking materials which were previously not available to you will begin dropping. You also begin obtaining ancestral gear from this point onward, though once you unlock Torment 1, it can drop at any level, even normal. So once reaching max level 60, reaching Torment 1 will become your prime objective. The jump from Torment 1 to Torment 2 will not be an easy one, and for reference, it's about the same as jumping from normal to Torment 1 by my estimation, so you will spend a significant amount of time on Torment 1 perfecting your build and gear. Because each torment level significantly reduces your resistances and armor, you have to find better and better versions of the gear you are currently using in order to make your way to Torment 4, and this will take some time. Since we've gotten leveling and difficulty out of the way, next I want to cover a recap of itemization changes, since these are probably the most fundamental changes to Diablo 4 since its release. In the not too distant past, the gameplay loop of Diablo 4 heavily focused on finding items with 4 very specific perfectly rolled affixes, and then imprinting it with another perfectly rolled aspect you would extract from another legendary. Thankfully, this system has been completely overhauled. Now, all rare items only drop with 2 affixes, making them virtually useless once you're at level 60. And legendary items drop with only 3 affixes on them, and many conditional affixes have been completely removed from dropped gear. This simplifies the pool of affixes and makes it easier to get what you're looking for. Additionally, stats have been reduced nearly tenfold with the Vessel of Hatred update, and this is true for all players regardless of whether they purchase the expansion or not. Damage, armor, and health are now much lower than they were previously, though things fundamentally work the same, you just won't have to do as much math. On top of that, sacred legendary items are being phased out and will be marked legacy and cannot be upgraded or tempered, and all level 60 legendary items will now all drop at item power 750 whenever you get one. Level 60 ancestral legendary items always drop with item power 800, however, which is the highest possible, and greater affixes only appear on ancestral items, and ancestral items will now always contain at least 1 greater affix, so you know you have an ancestral item if you see the star next to a piece of loot when it drops. Lastly, because character levels are being readjusted in the new realm-wide Paragon system, existing items with item power over 540 are being adjusted down to 540, and the affixes on these adjusted items will be re-rolled at the highest values in that range. What this means basically is that anyone who is very high level or max level who's been playing this game for any amount of time will have to refarm their gear, and if you haven't played in a long time, you'll have to refarm your gear. There are also 2 new affix types. One of these is a greater affix, which I just mentioned, which is an affix indicated by a star, which can only appear on ancestral, legendary, and unique items once you've unlocked Torment 1. These affixes are 1.5 times stronger than a normal affix, making them incredibly powerful, and you can roll up to 3 of these on an ancestral legendary item or 4 on a unique item. The higher torment level you go, the more likely it is for these to drop. The other type of affix are tempered affixes. Tempering in Diablo 4 is a system that allows you to add custom affixes to your gear at any blacksmith. To add these affixes, you need to find and use tempering manuals from defeating bosses, world bosses, and nightmare dungeons, amongst other activities. The manual will be added to your codex, and you'll be able to use it on applicable gear via the blacksmith in town anytime you want, as long as you have the materials. Each manual has a different focus. For example, the Agility Efficiency Manual for the Rogue has 4 affixes focused on the Agility tree: Agility Cooldown Reduction, Shadow Step Cooldown Reduction, Caltrops Cooldown Reduction, and Dash Cooldown Reduction. When you apply this manual to any gear at a blacksmith, you will imprint one of these affixes at random onto that piece of gear. Hopefully it's the one you want, but if it's not, you can re-roll up to 5 times. You can apply 2 tempered affixes to each piece of legendary gear, and the options available are different for each, not unlike how some legendary aspects can only be applied to certain pieces of gear. If you don't end up getting the affixes you want, you can use a new item from the Vessel of Hatred expansion to give you more attempts, but you will need the expansion in order to get it, but they are rare, so don't count on them. Once you have tempered 2 affixes onto a piece of gear in case of legendary items, or once you have a unique, you can begin masterworking it at a blacksmith with a crafting material called Obdicite. These materials drop all over the game on Torment 1, and this system replaced the previous system of just upgrading equipment. Each time you masterwork a piece of gear, it will improve all affixes on that gear by 5%, making it more powerful, and on the 4th masterworking, you will randomly increase one of the affixes on your gear by 25%. Level 750 item power gear can only be masterworked 8 times, however 800 item power gear can be masterworked 12 times, which means you can get 3 random 25% increases on these items. These might all land on the same affix, making it incredibly strong, or they might spread out among your affixes. However, if you didn't boost the affix or affixes you wanted, you can start over for a gold fee at the blacksmith and try again. This means the best practice is to find the correct affixes on a piece of gear via farming, changing one affix if needed at the occultist, and then imprinting the legendary aspect you need onto it. Then head to the blacksmith to temper the 2 bonuses you want onto it, and then begin masterworking it. Once you start getting ancestral gear, you'll replace your 750 legendary items and uniques, and begin this process again with level 800 item power items. And speaking of legendary aspects, as of Season 4, you now no longer need to save your best aspects for salvaging in your storage, and once you salvage a piece of legendary equipment at a blacksmith, you can imprint that aspect as many times as you want at the occultist, as long as you have the materials. The higher roll you salvage, the better your imprint will be, and once you salvage a max rolled aspect, whenever you imprint that aspect, it will always imprint at max roll. So salvage your unwanted legendaries and upgrade the aspects in your codex for future use. Two last notes on itemization, and the first being that gems have changed and most have completely different effects, which you should look over and decide what is best for your build. Gems can also now be salvaged and reformed into better gems, so you don't take up valuable inventory space with them. Runewords have also been added to the game that allow even more customization to your build. You'll mix 2 runes together to create a rune word that will take up 2 gem slots in your legs, chest, or helm. Helms now have 2 gem sockets. These rune words have different effects and can even cast skills of other classes. We'll have a full video on this, but just know they are now a part of Diablo 4. Note that runes only drop for you if you own Vessel of Hatred, but you can trade them from other players even if you don't own the expansion. The endgame of Diablo 4 has changed remarkably since launch, and there are many more activities that have been introduced with the seasons over the past year, and gone are the days where you would just try to run Nightmare Dungeons forever, trying to get as high as you could and maybe fight Uber Lilith if you got bored. Now endgame activities include boss fights added in Season 2, the Pit of Artificers added in Season 4, Infernal Hordes added in Season 5, and Helltides are more rewarding than ever with more mob density and the Maiden of Blood, who you can fight for guaranteed loot drops. We'll have a complete endgame guide later. For now, let's just give you a rough overview of what these things are. First up is Nightmare Dungeons. Yes, Nightmare Dungeons are still a thing, and you will run them mainly for 2 reasons. First, they're a great source of legendary item drops for the time spent to complete them, and if you need legendary aspects, this is a good place to begin. Second, elites drop a lot of crafting materials, most notably iron chunks, which seem to always be in demand, and Nightmare Dungeons are usually full of them. So run these if you need iron chunks or just some legendary aspects. Note that you can run these on lower difficulties than Torment 1 and still get legendaries and materials. Next is Tree of Whispers. Yes, Tree of Whispers are still in the game, and you will do some Tree of Whispers objectives from time to time, mostly as a byproduct of farming Helltides. Not too many people will go out of their way to do these when they don't coincide with another activity, though they are a great form of XP if you're trying to level a character solo, which is arguably the best reason to do them. Note that you can do them from the start of the game on a new character if you've previously completed the campaign. Helltides are next. Helltides are way more fun now than they ever were before. Not only has the mob density been drastically improved, making them quite hectic at times, there is now a gauge that fills as you defeat enemies in a Helltide, and as it gets closer and closer to being full, more and more enemies start spawning around you until a Hellborn arrives and your gauge resets. Additionally, the Blood Maiden has been added, which is a boss with guaranteed loot, and Helltides are a great place to farm boss summoning materials as well. Next is World Bosses. Just like before, you can face off against World Bosses periodically when they spawn on the map. Each one has weekly caches that give you guaranteed loot, so they're worth doing at least once a week per boss. These haven't changed much, so don't expect anything crazy here. Summoned bosses are next. Endgame bosses have also been added in Diablo 4 as of Season 2, and you cannot face off against them until you make it to Torment 1. In order to fight one of these 6 bosses, you'll need to acquire enough of their summoning materials, which are blue when they drop, and these can drop from all over the game world or be found in caches for Mercenary Den bartering and seasonal reputation rewards. You will then need to proceed to their spawn locations and use these materials on the summoning altar. These bosses have 2 guaranteed uniques per run with their own loot pools, so you can target farm specific uniques you might want. They also have a chance to drop mythic items, and you can see our guide on this for all the details. Next is Pit of Artificers. Season 4 added a new game activity called the Pit of Artificers. It might be familiar if you've ever played Diablo 3 since it's quite similar. Interacting with the portal activator in Saragar will spawn a portal to a dungeon of whatever tier you select using 3 Artificer stones. These stones drop from all kinds of activities in the game world, so you should have plenty of them. Once inside the portal, you'll run a random dungeon against a clock, killing enemies quickly in order to face off against a boss. You won't get loot while doing this until you defeat the boss, so don't worry about looting, just defeat enemies as quickly as you can. Once you face the boss, it will have some altered mechanics that Nightmare Dungeons don't have, making it more challenging, and once the boss is defeated, you'll get rewards and will be able to upgrade your glyphs. This is the only way to upgrade your glyphs in Diablo 4 as of now, so get used to running the pit regularly. It is also the main measure for difficulty advancement, as specific pit tiers unlock higher torment difficulties. Next are Infernal Hordes. Season 5 added Infernal Hordes, which is a special arena with waves of enemies that you face off against while trying to acquire as much Aether as you can from defeating specific spawns. If you successfully survive all waves, then you will face off against the Council, and once you've defeated them, you'll get to spend your Aether on loot, materials, and gold. You need 200 Aether to open the loot chest that guarantees an ancestral legendary item, and the more waves your Infernal Horde Compass has, the more likely you are to gain enough Aether to open it, but also the more challenging it will become. Like Nightmare Sigils, the difficulty you use the Infernal Horde Compass on is the difficulty it will be, with the variable being the number of waves each has. If you want to do Infernal Hordes on another difficulty, you must change the difficulty at the World Stone and then use the compass. Next is the Undercity. The Kurest Undercity is a special expansion location in Kurest Bazaar in Nahantu. After doing a short quest to unlock this activity, you will create a portal to the area and enter a time trial focused on clearing 3 floors before facing off against a boss with some interesting mechanics. Each floor of the dungeon has special pillars that reward you attunement. Filling your attunement by defeating enemies and clearing the special enemies from those pillars will increase your dungeon rewards up to 4 levels. Of course, as you're fighting against a clock, you need to also defeat some special elites called Afflicted to add more time to your run. The Kurest Undercity is very special because you can use offerings to customize the rewards you get, ranging from experience to guaranteed class unique drops. It's also very fun. And lastly, also exclusive to those who own Vessel of Hatred, is the Dark Citadel. This is the endgame equivalent of a raid in an MMORPG with light raid mechanics that require some teamwork between players. There are 3 wings to this raid, and each one is harder than the last, culminating in boss fights in each wing. The Dark Citadel gives special loot and currency, and is the only way to buy a Scroll of Restoration to add more rolls to your tempering, so it's definitely worth doing, although you may get these scrolls from seasonal rewards and bartering mercenary caches. There are also weekly locks for this cache, just like world bosses, but it can also show up as a whisper task. Finally, it's the expansion and the new features that come with it. Of course, there's the Runewords as mentioned above, and the Kurest Undercity and Dark Citadel are the endgame activities added, but there's also an entire new zone to explore. Vessel of Hatred adds Nahantu and allows you to explore a jungle region with new enemies and new combinations of ideas. The zone has many side quests and objectives to complete, including finding some special idols and removing corruption from them to gain zone reputation. Gaining this reputation will reward you with 2 extra skill points, a new potion slot, paragon points, and obol capacity, so it's well worth doing. There's of course the story side of this, which is the main quest advancement for the overall plot of Diablo 4. I won't spoil anything, but it's certainly an interesting play for those who can resist the urge to skip all dialogue because they are eager for the loot. If you're one such people, you'll be happy to know once you complete the campaign, your alts can pick to start with only base game completed, or with both the base game and expansion completed. Nahantu also allows you to unlock the new game feature, Mercenaries. These companions are first found via the main quest, and they have to be unlocked one by one with smaller side quests. There are 4 of them, and each has their own rapport meter from the time they spend playing with you. This is like an experience bar, and the more elites you kill or content you do, the more they fill up until rank 10. Gaining rapport gives you many rewards, including caches of loot, bartering coins to buy stuff from the Mercenary Special Shop at the Den, and skill points to fill out the Mercenary's own skill tree, which they will use in combat and have synergies with your play. As with the campaign, your alts will retain all unlocked mercenaries and their advancement level, reducing grind and tedium. And last by no means least is the new class, the Spiritborn. This pseudo-monk druid witch doctor mashup is a dexterity class with 4 elemental spirit guardians that govern its skill lines. Because it has 4 distinct trees, the class is incredibly versatile and can be built in many different ways, be it a direct damage heavy hitter to a speed and crit zoomer, or an easy mode damage over time poisoner. This is probably the biggest appeal of the expansion for everyone, as it can be its own entire world of discovery. We have beginner and advanced builds for the class ready, so check them out on the channel near launch. And this concludes our rather lengthy catch-up of Diablo 4. I really tried to keep this short, but there have been so many massive changes over the past year, and the expansion is adding so many more, that I feel we're really experiencing a completely new game from the one I originally played at launch. If you're one of those people who enjoyed the launch but got burnt out on the season system or upset your build got nerfed, you should absolutely give it a new try and enjoy the revamped loot system and the many quality of life changes. So what do you guys make of all of this? Will you be playing the expansion at launch, or will you just be coming back to see all these changes before deciding about Vessel of Hatred? Let me know in the comments below.